Lee McLean is the Chief Executive Officer of Australian Grape and Wine. We're talking about the latest data from ABARES about just how the wine industry is travelling. How are you going, Lee?
Very well, thanks, Ricky. How are you?
Look, I'm fine. I know it's been a really rough ride for our wine industry, particularly given the restrictions China's placed on our product entering their market. This ABARES data just shows what a difficult time it's been.
Yeah, it certainly does, and it doesn't make for a particularly pleasant read for a lot of growers out there, or for me either. I think the big picture for me is that while there has been some really positive movement in terms of the bilateral relationship between Australia and China in recent months, the reality is that the situation in China remains roughly the same. The impediments to trade remain, and we still have a pretty significant oversupply situation that is impacting our sector in quite a dramatic way, and without some pretty significant investment in growing demand internationally and diversifying our markets, I think that we're likely to see some of this problematic conditions remaining for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I noticed in South Australia, for instance, the state government there's looking at a US market entry program and trying to encourage wineries to get on board to get out into that. But I think China is just such a big fish in that destination market sea, and also there's the tourism that comes off the back of that as well.
That's exactly right. So from an export perspective, we're calling on the government to invest in helping businesses to crack a number of new markets. We think the businesses are best placed to do a lot of that work themselves. There's some current arrangements under the EMDG, Export Market Development Grants Program. It's been a really effective way to help businesses to get into new markets around the world. But one of the issues is that a lot of businesses that have been eligible in the past have exhausted their eligibility under the grants program. So we're hoping to see some relaxation of some of those arrangements, because it's really those businesses that have been in markets previously that have the experience in terms of building new markets that we want to see, hoping to get into those markets to shift some Australian wine and build demand into new markets as well.
And I notice you've got a pre-budget submission into Treasurer Jim Chalmers as he frames the next budget. You're talking about improving sustainability in the vineyard. This has been a key sort of marketing element, among other reasons, for our wine grape producers, is just how alert they are to the impact they're having on their environment.
Absolutely. So I think for grape growers and winemakers around Australia, there is a real imperative within their own businesses and within their own communities to be doing the right thing by the environment. But also, it must be said that retailers and consumers around the world are increasingly demanding, us to demonstrate our sustainability credentials. So, in previous years, where a consumer might have looked for value for money or flavour or aroma as their sort of key drivers of a purchasing decision, now consumers are looking a bit beyond that. So they're looking for things like, how are we treating the environment, our water use, how are we treating labour, all of these sorts of things. So that is absolutely a key focus for us. We think that we can be the most sustainable wine industry in the world, and we can use that as a competitive advantage in the future. But the reality is, in the decades to come, being sustainable and demonstrating that in a clear way to consumers is going to be a sort of baseline requirement if we're going to be selling wines internationally.
And looking at the ABARES data out during this week when we're talking, it does tell a pretty terrible picture. I mean, wine grape production down 32% in this current financial year. They say it might lift 11% to 834% next year. But for our wine grape growers, the prices, they know it all too well. Since 2019-20 for reds, they've been really low. They may uptick, but white wines might plateau a little bit.
That's exactly right. So as I said, it's not a particularly pleasant read for a lot of growers out there, but equally it probably tells a story that they're already very much familiar with. The reality is that under the current set of circumstances, without that large market in China consuming a lot of the wine that we produce, things are going to be very problematic. So from my perspective, what we really need to be focusing on now is growing demand, both here at home and abroad. Whether that is in whether that's in the China market, if that is to open again, that's part of it. But the other part is, of course, really doing everything we can to make sure that we've diversified our market opportunities right across the world. So we're doing a lot of work to help develop the right conditions in India for example. We think India's got an enormous amount of potential, and we're also doing quite a bit of work in established markets like Korea and Japan as well. We think that those markets have a lot of potential.
And also this ABARES data also indicates that they believe red wine grape prices will remain low over their outlook period, and that could incentivise reductions in vineyard area. Naturally, you wouldn't want people to exit the industry, but surely it's when they look at the oversupply, is there a possibility we might at last get on top of the oversupply if there's that sort of market activity?
One thing to note here is that the ABARES report it's a very good report in that it's independent and it provides the information to growers to make business decisions themselves, but it doesn't factor in a return of the China market. So we are sort of hoping that in time we can reopen that market, and that might alleviate some of the worst of the forecast reductions that ABARES is forecasting. But there's no doubt that after some period of time, there'll be a number of grape growers and winemakers out there who've been facing, really, really difficult conditions for a number of years now, who may be considering whether they want to go on with their business. There are options out there in the form of farm household support and the like from the Australian government that can help people manage difficult conditions at the moment. But there's no doubt that for a number of businesses out there, they'll be considering what their future looks like.
Now, so much of our wine grapes are grown off of the River Murray, the Murray-Darling Basin. There is the basin plan under review at the moment, and talk about potential buybacks. But I imagine, as we talked about sustainability earlier, wine grape growers are getting more efficient and might be in a position maybe to sell a little bit of water in the current climate.
That would certainly be on the table for a number of grape growers and winemakers out there. One thing to note about our water use is that that is absolutely tied into our sustainability story. We've done a huge amount of work over recent years in terms of trying to make sure that we are as efficient as possible, that we're not wasting any water on our vineyards. Obviously, we've still got more work to do on that, but when you look at us compared to a number of other producer nations around the world, we have a really good story to tell in terms of our water use. So the Murray-Darling Basin issue is obviously really complex, and there's a lot of social issues that are associated with it and attached to it. So eventually we'll see how that pans out here in Canberra with Minister Plibersek and the Albanese government. But we're certainly hoping to be at the table to have those discussions.
Yeah, and I guess as a closing point, it does seem that to try and put a positive light on it, we're always trying to uphold ourselves to a gold or even platinum standard with what we do environmentally and otherwise in the industry, and we're competing and we're trying to market with that gold or platinum standard against countries that aren't quite up to that standard.
That's exactly right. So as I said, I think we do have a real opportunity to be a world leader in sustainability in our wine industry. Consumers are demanding it, retailers are increasingly demanding it, and even in things like free trade agreements, as we see in the European example at the moment, governments are starting to demand this stuff as well. So the earlier we can get on top of the sustainability discussion and really demonstrate to the world that we are a sustainable producer nation, the better we'll be. So there is a really good story to tell there. We've got a lot of work to do, but we're certainly up to the challenge.
Good to hear. Lee McLean is the Chief Executive Officer of Australian Grape and Wine. Thanks so much for joining us today on Flow FM.
It's a pleasure. Thanks.